Welcome back to the Brand Gravity Show, where we explore the intersection between branding and psychology. I'm your host, psychology driven brand strategist Kaye Putnam. And today we have none other but Guy Kawasaki. You might recognize his name. He was a chief evangelist for Apple previously, now a chief evangelist for Canva, and has written 15 and counting books, including Art of the Start, Enchantment, and many others. My conversation with Guy was highly entertaining, very spirited. We dive into what it looks like to build a personal brand over decades, the future that Guy sees in AI and other emerging technologies, along with how his incredible career has unfolded. Let's get right to the conversation. Guy, thank you so much for being on the Brand Gravity Show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. As you were just saying before we hit record, you have an incredible podcast, The Remarkable People. What has been your favorite conversation so far, your favorite takeaway from the podcast?
Oh man. I've written a 200-page book about my favorite conversations and favorite pieces of advice. So, you know, if you look at my podcast, it's depending on whether you want to look at it as half full or half empty. Half empty, you would say there's no discernible theme or focus. Half full, you'd say, oh my God, there is a theme. It's remarkable people. And so I have people that go from Jane Goodall to Steve Wozniak to, someone who had two crack addict parents who became a respiratory therapist. I have Christy Yamaguchi, Ronnie Lott, Brandy Chastain. I have athletes. I have opera performers. Uh, it's hard to narrow down. So I wrote a book with Madison Neismer, the producer. It's called Think Remarkable, as a play on Apple's ad campaign, Think Different, that they saved the company along with the iMac. And so what I've done is I've taken those 200 interviews and I've cherry picked what I think are the essence and strategies to become remarkable and make a difference. So that's a long answer to your question, which is you have to wait till March and read the book. It's called Think Remarkable.
I cannot wait to read it. I hope this isn't out of left field. I don't think it will be. In your famous TED Talk, you talk about the fact that brands and businesses should make meaning
Yes.
in service of making money, not going after making money. What is your purpose or what is your meaning in your work that you're doing right now?
My work right now, listen, I'm 69 years old. Basically, I'm fading into the sunset. And so at this point, I'm still chief evangelist of Canva, but Canva's doing so well, I couldn't hurt Canva if I tried. So I'm doing this podcast and I'm writing this book and I'm surfing, not necessarily in that order. And I guess at the end of my life, when I die, I want people to say that I helped them make a difference. In other words, that I empowered them in this case with a podcast and book, but also generally my writing, speaking, even investing and advising.
Amazing. I'd love to dive into a little bit of your background. I work a lot with personal brands, a lot with entrepreneurs that are building personal brands, and you made the switch from running your own company into more of a speaking, writing, consulting role a while ago. How has the landscape changed?
Certainly the landscape changed with social media because before, it was a real struggle. You had press conferences. What a concept. And you had to bribe people with white wine and shrimp. And now, it's all digital, it's instant, it's basically free. Having said that, now there's a lot more noise, but certainly you don't have to rent ballrooms at the Ritz-Carlton anymore. A lot of people ask me, how do I create a personal brand? How do I position myself as a guru, thought leader, visionary, or whatever? And I hate to tell you, but I tell them that that's bullshit and that the way you position yourself and develop a brand is not because you decided to develop a brand. It's because you do shit, right? So Steve Jobs, Macintosh, iPhone, iPod, iPad, Apple Store, you name it. And so because he did these things, his brand is innovation, vision, et cetera, et cetera. I doubt that he ever had a conversation with Apple's PR department or even with himself that said, how can I make myself into a brand? So the long and the short of this advice is rather than trying to position yourself as a brand, do good shit and the brand will come naturally.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. I think a lot of people focus on the wrong things, or they focus on the superficial part, the result part, and they skip the hard work and they skip the making an impact and making part. So it's a really good reminder.
Well, if
Uh,
if you make impact and you do good shit, making a brand is easy.
yeah.
In fact, it just organically happens. It's when you haven't done good shit. And, we talked a lot about my book already, but I also meet a lot of authors or wannabe authors. And I say to them, why do you want to write the book? And I say, well, I want to position myself as a brand and visionary and innovator. And I'd like to get more speeches and, increase my consulting practice. And again, my answer is that's bullshit. You write a book when you have something to say, and a book should be an end in itself, not a means to an end.
And you've written, is it, are you up to 15, 16? How many books have you written?
Think Remarkable will be number 16.
Amazing.
Although some people
Congratulations.
say I wrote one book 16 times.
Do you feel like you've written one book 16 times?
No.
I
I
don't think
feel
so
like I've
either.
written 32 books, but 16 came out.
Yes, I could see how that would be. One of those books is you literally wrote the book on social media. Some would argue that it is one of the best books on social media. I feel like this is a loaded question. I don't want to word it this way, but do you feel like that book is still as relevant today as it was when you published it? Or do you feel like things are fundamentally
Oh
changing?
boy, that's a heavy question.
I
When we
know.
published it, it was 5, 6 years ago, and people were wondering, how do I use Twitter? How do I use Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. So that book is a compilation of best practices about, how to post, when to post, where to post, all this kind of tactical stuff. The world is very different. I mean, for one thing, that book was written before TikTok. It's kind of a big deal. It was also written while Google Plus was alive. Also a big deal. It was also written before Twitter became a place for white nationalists and Nazis to hang out. That's kind of a big deal. So, and I have to say that you may find this ironic coming out of my mouth, but I don't know if you can have the same impact with social media that you could 5, 10 years ago. A lot of it is because there's just exhaustion. It's so noisy. Nobody knows who to believe. And yeah, I swear half the people there are Russian bots. It's like it went from a really nice swimming pool into a cesspool. Cesspools serve a purpose, but I would not recommend swimming in them.
Amazing. And yet you still are a prolific content creator, granted, maybe more in the
Well,
books that you're authoring, the stages that you're speaking on.
yeah. Well, let me be frank about that. So, my attitude towards social media has more or less always been it's a means to an end. And the end is, well, two, sometimes in opposition. One end is I feel that I have visibility, and with that comes the responsibility. So I use social media to further causes that I think are necessary in the world. The second reason is to sometimes entertain. And the third reason is to promote my stuff. Now, I believe that you earn the right to promote your stuff by providing value. That's why people donate to Wikipedia, right? And so Wikipedia does such a great service, so does NPR, that people feel obligated to pay in some way. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Now, that is, and I am really not a content creator on social media. I consider myself more of a filter and let's see, an arbiter of taste. And so I spend many hours looking for content that I believe should be shared as opposed to creating that content. The creation of content for me is primarily writing a book. It's not, making this great 30-second TikTok video, because quite frankly, I don't know how to do that. I'm too old to do that. I'm the wrong gender, wrong age. I'm wrong everything for that. So I think social media is a very interesting place right now. And I mean, if you come right down to it, I would rather have someone's email address than someone following me.
100%. I agree with you there. 100%. So, rewinding very back a little bit further, you grew up in Hawaii. My daughter was actually born on Honolulu, so we have a little bit of shared history. We spent some time there.
What hospital?
A couple in Honolulu.
The one right next to the freeway?
Yeah, the Queen's Hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. So your daughter, me, and Barack Obama were all born in that hospital.
Oh, amazing! I didn't realize that. That's incredible.
Barack and I were not born in Africa. Okay, just
Okay,
FYI.
just for putting the record down for anybody that missed the memo. It is not the truth. All right. So what if anything, and I know you've talked about it like on your own podcast. I listened to your birthday podcast episode, which is fantastic. But I'm curious, what values or what spirit of aloha have you brought with you?
Well, when I grew up in a lower middle income area, and it was, maybe financially we were poor, but I never felt poor. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't have a Horatio Alger story like I raised myself with. I got off a boat and I had one suitcase and $5. I never lower income, but not zero income. Okay. And I grew up with, where white people were the minority. So I never had this oppressive sort of experience where I felt like a minority that the majority was picking on. If anything, when I grew up, Asian Americans or Japanese Americans in Hawaii, they were the dominant force. So now you didn't ask me about domination, you asked me about aloha spirit. So, I think one of them is that it's like people of different races are no big deal because that's how I grew up. It's, not like I grew up in Beverly Hills and never saw a black or brown person or yellow person. So that's one thing. And the second thing, I think, is primarily my parents. They raised me with a sense of noblesse oblige, which is, you're lucky, guy. And so you owe something to society. In my book, I actually have altered that phrase, noblesse oblige, to success oblige.
Yeah.
What I think is wrong with the term noblesse oblige is that it implies it's for the nobility, which in itself is arrogant. If you say you have noblesse oblige, then it means you think you're noble. And I'm not, Meghan Markle or Prince Harry, or I don't want to be. Although I love Suits, don't get me wrong. I watched all
same.
7 seasons of Suits. But I don't think I'm nobility. Having said that, anybody who's successful, noble, not noble, I hope they're all noble, nobility or not, I think has a moral obligation to help others. So I call it success oblige.
I love that. I also love Suits. We just started rewatching it again. So just
I would have finished this book 6 months earlier if it wasn't for Suits. I kid you not, there are days I watch Suits for 2 or 3 hours.
I don't know if you've had the same experience, and this is neither here nor there about business or branding, but it's so interesting to watch those shows that came out 10, 20 years ago. It feels like a little time capsule of how life was. And it's a joy to watch. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you more about Canva. You started working with Canva early, 2013. I think this was even before I was aware that it existed, although I had been in the online world. I'm curious what the early days of being an evangelist for Canva looks like. What were the types of things that were doing?
So back then, and I believe this to this day, the key to rolling out a new product is the demo, right? It's not the PowerPoint, because every PowerPoint says that innovation, bug-free, innovative, easy to use, fast, reliable, safe, blah, blah, blah. You know what? It would be great if somebody rolled out a product and said, it's full of bugs, it's slow, it's poorly documented, we're not sure if it's secure. In fact, we think it's a piece of shit. If everybody did that, then you could say you're secure, fast, easy to use, and innovative. So anyway, I think it's all about the demo. So for me back then, it was about doing demos. And many of the earliest users of Canva found out about Canva through me. And, I just planted a lot of seeds And those seeds became seedlings and then saplings and then oaks. And these oaks are now dropping acorns. And so this is like second, third generation Canva user that they don't even know who I am. But way back when I was planting acorns.
That's amazing. Amazing.
But
Well,
yeah, one
and
more thing I want to say about
yeah,
Canva. And this is called Guy's Golden Touch. So Guy's Golden Touch is not whatever I touch turns to gold. Guy's Golden Touch is whatever is gold Guy touches. And so I have to tell you that demoing Canva and evangelizing Canva was very easy because Canva inherently, and no credit to me, Canva inherently is such a great product. I
Yeah.
mean, you didn't have to really spend a long time showing people Canva before they understood why they wanted it.
there seems to be a thread or a theme here that's running through our conversation. It's
What's
more
that?
about just focus on the quality, focus on the impact, doing the good work, and then the marketing piece gets easy, and then the evangelism becomes
Yeah.
easy. Yeah.
It-
So going back to what Guy touches is gold. I'm curious, is that advice that you gave to your kids when you're launching them out into the world and in, hoping that they would be a success? What did you try to instill into your children as they were getting older?
The key word in this question is try. How old is your daughter?
I have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter. So we're like right in the thick of childhood at the
Okay,
moment.
so you already understand that you are not in control. Control of your kids is a figment of your imagination. I have tried to instill, I think more than anything else, there are two concepts. First is growth, the growth mindset of Carol Dweck. That is, that people are malleable, they're flexible, they can learn. That, you're not just good at math or bad at math and you should try anything else. I've tried to live that by taking up surfing at 60, right? So the growth mindset says, yes, you can try new things. And then the flip side of growth is grit. So we have Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth basically shaping my life. And I have tried to show that dad is grinding it out. Nothing is delivered on a silver platter for me. And they've seen me for the past year write a book. And if you think, or if anybody thinks writing a book is the kids are all perfect, straight A, the room's clean, the house is clean, they're fed, everybody's happy, you're sitting on a windswept beach and you have this fountain pen and you're writing on parchment and your wisdom is flowing out through the ink in your gold nib. Now, you are on some hardcore drugs, man. That is not how it's like. And so I hope they've seen, what it takes to write a book. Because as they say, you don't want to see how the sausage is made.
So other than having something that you absolutely need to say in the book, what other advice would you give to aspiring authors?
Well, listen, the most important book an aspiring author could read is my book. It is a book by Brenda Ueland, Ueland, and it's called If You Want to Write. Now, she was a writing instructor, and the gist of this book is if you want to write, write. Don't worry about getting a PhD in English. Don't worry about taking a class in writing. Don't worry about taking a class in how to finish a book. Crying out loud, just write. And learning that from this book was pivotal in my life. And so I highly recommend them. Now, if you're not a writer, if you're a programmer, musician, filmmaker, whatever, if you make the best tamales, I don't care what it is, you should read this book because it's written for writers, but it's really about anything that takes creativity. And I think, for example, cooking is creativity, right? It may not be all hoity-toity, but I think it's creativity. There's a lot of creativity in cooking. So anybody who's doing anything creative, and just about everything is creative at some level, they should read If You Want to Write by Brenda Ueland and then buy my book.
Yes. And we'll have all of the links in the show notes below for all of these great resources that Guy's mentioning. That's amazing. Such sage advice. I feel like especially in my line of work in consulting and brand building and helping businesses get out into the world, I see it firsthand a lot where business owners, entrepreneurs, they get stuck in the planning, they get stuck in the strategizing instead of just bringing their work to the world. And very wise advice. Speaking of new things, I know that you're experimenting with, I know we're this in a potentially offensive way, but you've been playing with ChatGPT, and so much so that you have all of your body of work into a guide GPT, if you will. I don't know what the final name is. I was
It's
going to ask
KawasakiGPT.com.
Kawasaki GPT. I was going to ask if that was, I feel like that's the way of almost becoming immortal. Like you get to have a lasting
Exactly.
impact. So
That's
I didn't want to,
exactly what it is.
yes, I didn't want to infer that you are a god or consider yourself one, but I think this is an amazing project. Can you talk a little bit about the process and what anything surprising that's happened as you've been developing it?
Well, I really haven't told people about it because I'm waiting for things to kind of settle down.
Yeah.
But Kawasaki GPT contains the transcripts of all the episodes plus my writings. So theoretically, when you go to Kawasaki GPT and you ask a question about, let's say, growth mindset, you're not just hearing from Guy, you're hearing from Guy and Carol Dweck, because Carol Dweck is in my podcast. And so I may have one of the broadest sets of knowledge because there's 200 transcripts in there. Whereas if you just asked, I don't know, an astrophysicist, if there was astrophysicist GPT, you could only ask about astrophysics. You couldn't ask about what's it take to win the World Cup in soccer, which you can ask me because I have Brandy Chastain, right? So that was the idea. And it was more, I just wanted to see what would happen. But zooming out from your specific question about Kawasaki GPT, I'll tell you that I think artificial intelligence is a humongous deal, arguably bigger than the internet and personal computing. And I think it absolutely is going to change everything. I think what people should be cautioned of is you have to compare apples against apples versus oranges. And in many discussions of artificial intelligence, you're hearing an argument about the best case of humanity, about the worst case of technology. So the best case of humanity is we all love each other, democracy, freedom, rights. The worst case of AI is it takes over the world and creates nuclear war. So you got to either go apples and apples or oranges and oranges. So apples and apples would be you take the best case of humanity and the best case of AI and compare them, or the worst case of humanity and the worst case of AI. But I think most of the articles you read, they paint this picture of, well, I went to ChatGPT and it told me to leave my wife and to start a fentanyl gang or, whatever, right? And then they take that and say, see, ChatGPT is flawed. It's telling you to leave your wife and to become a drug dealer. Well, I hate to tell you, but there are a lot of humans who tell you that too, but you don't talk about that. So it needs to be apples against apples or oranges against oranges, but not mixed. I will tell you, I use AI to write this book almost every day. And I don't use it, if you're worried, I don't say to ChatGPT, write me a book about how to become remarkable, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, that's everybody's fear, but that's not how it really works. So the way I use it is I need examples. So I say to ChatGPT, give me examples of people who made just totally like remarkable career transitions. Yeah. And it comes up and it says, okay, Jeff Bezos was a banker. He became a bookseller. Julia Child was a spook working for the CIA. She became a French chef, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I hate to tell you, but I never knew that Julia Child worked for the OSS before she married somebody, moved to France, and learned about French cooking, right? So this is a case where I'm using ChatGPT and Claude and Bard and all this as a research assistant. I also think that many times I'm searching for a word And now, obviously, there's thesaurus and thesaurus.com. You can put in innovation and you'll get 20 synonyms. There's a lot of things that it's not a word, it's a concept, right? So let's say that I want to talk about the necessity in innovation to jump to the next curve, to not do something just 10% better, but to do 10 times better. So you go to ChatGPT and you say, give me other expressions for jumping to the next curve, radical innovation, something like that. And it gives you 10 phrases. And I swear to God, one of them is going to be better than what you came up with.
It's
And
a
so,
thinking
how
partner.
can you argue with that? Yeah, it's so I look at these things as it's a research assistant, infinite knowledge, 24/7, $20 a month. How can you beat that?
It's
Now,
magical.
I'm telling, and then I read all these articles where people say ChatGPT isn't intelligent and isn't sentient. I don't know what test they're using, but I'm telling you, ChatGPT is smarter than me. There's no doubt in my mind ChatGPT is smarter than me.
I could geek out about AI for a long time, but we won't do that. I think the power, for me at least, is the customization. Like, you can give it a bunch of context, then ask it a question, and it gives you answers specific to what you're asking for. It's pure magic. But
It
the
is
question that
magic.
I'd like to ask you
It's
guys,
God.
it's incredible.
It's God. I'm telling you, it's God. Here's my theory.
What's there?
So God, she is sitting up there and she is watching what's going on. And she's going, oh my God, these idiots. I gave them free will. I let them control their own destiny. They're totally screwing it up. Pollution, climate change, war, racism, sexism, misogynism. These idiots are blowing it. Why, oh, why did I give them free will? They cannot embrace the concept that I exist, omniscient, omnipotent, immortal, and wise. I got to give them something that their simple brains can handle. So rather than trying to convince them that I exist, I'm going to send them this thing called AI, and they're going to think they created it, so they're going to trust it. But it's really me. That's my theory.
I mean, people attribute the zaps of genius or insight to God, universe, spirit all of the time. I don't think that far of a leap to say that it is an expression of those same things. So I dig it.
So
I
you
take it
heard
back.
it first. Here.
I love
AI
it.
is God.
For just going all over the place, having all kinds of fun. I wanted to wrap it up with a question about authenticity. I think one of your greatest traits and one of the most interesting things about you is you have a spirit about you that just feels very authentic. It feels like you're not putting on a mask or a front. You're saying what you want to say. And I'm curious how you are navigating that authenticity or preserving that authenticity with things like AI that's happening or automation or other types of.
One is I'm 69 years old. Let me explain that. I don't give a shit anymore, right? It's not like I got to be careful because, I don't know, someday I might apply to what? The NRA, the Republican National Committee, to be a marketing consultant. I don't give a shit. I'm never going to apply for another job, So that's number one. Number two is thank God for Canva, because it's easier to not give a shit if your options are worth a lot. Let's just be honest. Okay. So that's second thing. Third thing is I really feel I have a moral obligation to do what I consider is right and take the high road. And I'll tell you how I came to this conclusion. In 2000, it was 16, I guess. I was in Germany and I had dinner with these two friends. They're about 40, 45 years old. And this is when the primary election was over and it's Trump versus Clinton. And he said to me, Guy, to this day, we ask our grandparents, why did you let Hitler take over Germany? Like, cut in your brain that you would let somebody like that take over your country. And then they said to me, Guy, this is 1930 in the United States. Someday, you want your grandchildren to ask, Grandpa, did you resist Donald Trump or not? And Guy, when that question is asked, what's going to be the answer? And I went away from that. Then I said, holy shit. I know what I want the answer to be. And so that's when I went all in for Clinton. And I feel I have a moral obligation to do that. Now, it doesn't make everybody happy. It probably costs, certain people won't hire me for speeches. Some people won't read my book, but I feel I have a moral obligation. I'm not telling people that they got to agree with me. I'm just telling them this is what I think, and for better or for worse.
I love it.
So anyway, the question led on to authenticity. And that's who I really am.
And on that note, where can people go to learn more from you and to buy your books, Guy?
Well, they can't buy I don't, when does this
not
come
yet.
out?
It will be before your book launch, probably right around the end of this year. So
Okay.
we'll be a few months ahead of your book launch.
So my book will be out in the first week of March. And so until then, there is GuyKawasaki.com, but honestly, GuyKawasaki.com is basically brochureware. If you really want to see what I'm thinking and doing, you should follow me on LinkedIn. But obviously, if you've listened this long, you know that my LinkedIn thread is very liberal. I am pro-vaccination, pro-women's rights, pro-abortion rights, pro-LGBTQ. I want more people to vote. Like I just described some things that many people disagree with. So as long as you understand, that's what you're going to see when you go there.
Yep. Perfect.
You're having mixed emotions about having me.
No, I appreciate you being so amazing and being one of the things that I teach as not a tactic, but just as a truth. People respond to strong points of view. Some people will respond negatively, and that's not our job to manage. Our job is to be who we are, to be it at full volume. And I think you're a great example of that.
If I may give one more piece of practical advice, some of my quote unquote authenticity and strong opinions is because I came to the conclusion out of sheer laziness that if you tell people the truth, or at least what you believe is the truth, all the time, it's much easier to live because you don't have to remember what version you told people, right? If you're the CEO of a company that says one drop of your blood can diagnose all these diseases, then you have to remember, now, who did I tell that to? When did I say I was going to ship? What diseases did I say? Et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so I think as a general practice, you go through life, you just tell people the truth, and then you never have to remember, shit, what story did I tell that person? Oh my God, because that's much harder to remember.
Yeah. It's just much harder way to live in general. So sage advice. Thank you, Guy, for your wisdom, for your time, for the knowledge bombs that you sprinkled throughout. I appreciate you endlessly.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
There you have it, folks. Guy Kawasaki. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I appreciate you being here and listening to the Brand Gravity Show. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think of today's episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast streaming app, a 5-star review is so appreciated. It helps me attract amazing guests to the show, amazing entrepreneurs like yourself who will benefit from these insights, entertainment, and wisdom. Keep building your brand, keep sharing your genius, and I will see you on the next episode.